We are Anka. Stay tuned for updated real news.
Hello, Anka Daily News viewers. We're here with a development that the world is turning its eyes to. The recent event in Russia continued to shake the country's internal balances. The people have taken their long accumulated anger to the streets once again. However, the Russian media is trying harder than ever to cover up these events. No matter how much they try to suppress the facts, they are coming to light. What are the reasons behind this revolt? Why did the Russian people once again take to the streets? Will the measures taken by the state against this situation prevent the riot from growing? Or are these events a harbinger of a much bigger crisis? Throughout history, many authoritarian regimes have tried to silence the voice of the people, but in the information age, no truth can be hidden forever. In Russia, tight control over the media and state propaganda are being used extensively to conceal the problems facing the population. This time, however, the picture is different. The images and leaked information circulating on social media have brought the events that the Kremlin tried to cover up to the international arena. We see that this rebellion is not limited to street protests. Economic difficulties, military losses, and the pressure created by international sanctions are dragging the Russian people into a more difficult period than ever before. So, what impact will this situation have on the future of the country? In the coming minutes, we'll go behind the scenes of this surprising uprising in detail. In which cities did the protests break out? What are the methods of state intervention? And most importantly, how could these events create a breaking point in Russia's governance? We'll discover the answers to all these questions together. But before we get to our report, a quick reminder: the Anka Daily News team is definitely real. Neither me nor any of my teammates are artificial intelligence. Even though AI is very advanced, it's still not as good as us. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our daily reports and explanations. We do read all the comments you leave on our videos, so please continue to share your ideas about our content. Tell us in the comments what content you'd like to see on the Anka Daily News channel. And now let us begin if you're ready. Anka Daily News reports. Tension is rising every day on the cold and gloomy streets of Moscow. As the war in Ukraine enters its third year, the patience of the Russian people is running out. Prices have become uncontrollable due to economic sanctions, and access to basic food is becoming increasingly difficult. Market shelves are emptying and people have to wait in long queues. However, the biggest anger is against the Kremlin's unstoppable troop deployment. Yesterday morning in Voronezh, recruitment officials entered the neighborhoods and tried to recruit young people by force. A group of young people reacted to this situation. An unidentified young man said, "They took my brother. He did not come back. Is it my turn now?" He shouted, mobilizing the crowd. These words spread on social media in a short time and caused the incident to grow. By noon, hundreds of people marched towards the local administration building with banners in their hands, chanting slogans such as "Stop the war," "Give our children back." This war is not ours. The protesters became increasingly angry. Police forces tried to stop the crowd by setting up barricades. However, the protesters did not disappear and clashes broke out. After the events in Voronezh spread on social media, similar protests broke out in Moscow. Rostov and Samara. Especially in Samara, crowds gathered in front of police stations and demanded a halt to recruitment. In the evening, thousands of people took to the streets in Moscow. Despite the freezing winter cold, people raised their voices against the Kremlin, holding photographs of their fallen relatives. A mother waved the photograph of her son who died on the front line towards the security forces and shouted, "Did he die for Putin?" These words of the mother soon became the symbol of the protests. Putin administration resorts to its usual methods to suppress the events. In the evening, there were internet outages in many parts of Moscow. While the state media did not say a word about the protests, independent journalists tried to share images documenting police violence. However, these accounts were soon shut down and some journalists were detained. Police intervened in the demonstrations in Samara and arrested hundreds of people. Tear gas and batons were used on the street. Security forces began carrying out identity checks at metro stations to identify dissidents and activists. Protests were not limited to civilians. The social media posts made by some Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine have increased the fears of the Kremlin. Some military units posted messages such as, "This war is not our war. We want to return to our families." It is stated that the morale of the soldiers at the front is low and the number of desertions has increased. It's reported that some troops, especially those fighting on the Eastern Front, are reluctant to obey the Kremlin's orders. While it is stated that the number of soldiers questioning the necessity of war is increasing within the Russian army, it's suggested that this situation may cause the Kremlin to lose control. The anger, which started with the cry of a young man in Voronezh, spread all over Russia in a short time. As the voices of the protesters rose on the streets of Moscow, the Kremlin administration sought solutions in panic. However, the crackdowns are increasing the anger of the people rather than calming them. The anger now echoing across Russia symbolizes a growing revolt not only against the government but against the system itself. The people who have been ruled by the Kremlin for years through repression and propaganda are now putting aside their fears and demanding accountability. From Moscow to Samara, from Voronezh to Rostov, these protests show that the people's patience with war policies is running out. However, instead of listening to the demands of the people, the Putin administration prefers to increase repression. Internet blackouts, detentions, and police brutality are fueling a much bigger backlash than dispersing the angry crowds. As the Kremlin's fear grows every day, even Russian soldiers are beginning to question the pointlessness of the war. Young people fighting on the front line no longer want to blindly follow orders. The increase in desertion cases reveals not only the military dimension of the war, but also the fragility in domestic policies. Russia is facing both growing public anger on the domestic front and military failures on the foreign front. As the economic crisis deepens, it is a big question mark how the Kremlin will proceed in the coming days. Now, we'll closely follow how the Putin administration will manage this crisis and how the public reaction will evolve. So, how will these protests shape the future of Russia? Will the Putin administration listen to the demands of the people, or will it increase the pressure even more and trigger a new internal conflict? Can the refusal of Russian soldiers to fight change the course of the war? Let us know in the comments. We read and care about your points of view.